we've got a really good panel here today of experts wanting to talk to you about sports science. Some of you might have had lots and lots of help at the moment from your school or college. Some of you may be at the very start of thinking about what you would like to do going forward. So hopefully this webinar will give you a bit of insight into the degrees available out there, and also from an industry point of view, what is currently going on in the industry, what professions are there. It's changing all the time, and obviously it's developing as technology develops as well. So it's a really good chance to hear from individuals who are experiencing it at the moment. So just trying to move my screen on. So first of all, you might be thinking, who are A-Level Revision? So my name's Abby. I'm one of the directors of A-Level Revision. We do lots of A-level support for students, not just for PE, but for lots of other different subjects. So we do things like online classes, revision courses, teacher CPD, but the things you might find most useful at the moment are the student webinars that we're running, and also the lectures and the blog posts that we're currently putting out. So they'll be really useful for you starting this process and in your sports science journey. So who are our panel? So you should hopefully be able to see them on your screen. If everyone gives us a little wave, say hi, so everyone see us. There we go, lovely. So on our panel, so in terms of industry experts, so we've got Matt. Matt's currently a physiotherapist at Southampton Football Club. He's been a physio across different team sports. I'll let him explain a bit more about that himself, but he's not always been in football. He's a rugby lad at heart. Then Danielle. So Danielle works in the health and fitness industry. So she's very current in terms of content. So Dan puts out some excellent blog posts, runs some fantastic classes which are currently being offered online, and it's also an entrepreneur and influencer. So obviously two really different contrasting sporting careers there. Then we've got Nick. So Nick, if we give everyone a wave so you can see who you are. Nick's currently Programme Manager for PE and Sport and Youth Development at St Mary's University. And then from Bath University, we've got Sean and Jess. Sean, thanks Sean, he's a lecturer in applied statistics, but also works on the placement programme there. So if you want to do a gap year or sandwich year and go overseas, Sean's your person to speak to. And Jess is currently going into her final year at the University of Bath. So she'll give you a bit of an insight as to what it's like to be a student in university, but also her experience around choosing what to study and then applying for a sports science course and what that entailed. So, applying for a sport-related degree. We're going to start with you, Nick, if you don't mind. So, from what you offer at St Mary's, what tends to be the most important courses, and how should students think about choosing their course? Because there's so many out there, you know, how can students whittle it down if they know they want to do a sports degree but just have no idea where to start?
I think, good question really. I think that at St Mary's we have a suite of courses. So the course I run is Physical Education, Sport and Youth Development, which is a little bit for those students who are not really sure what they want to do, but they like PE and they're not very science-based. We also have a sports and exercise science degree, which is really big. It's double the size of our degree. And within that is very heavily science-based. So it's those students who really enjoyed doing the biomechanics, doing the exercise physiology on the A level. They're the kind of module choices that they have. However, quite a lot of those sports and exercise science students on our undergraduate then go on to do PGCE. So it depends on the experience that they gain while they're at university. So I think with the sports and exercise science, it opens that up for you to go on to become a BASIS scientist and gain further qualifications towards that. Or it opens it up towards then going into teaching, depending on the work experience that you gain on the degree. We also have a sports rehabilitation degree, and this year we're I think we're starting a physiotherapy degree as well. And they're very much vocational based. And so you will have real experience in the field very early on. And it's very much based on professional status. So there are requirements on the course for how many hours you need to do. And so for the student who doesn't really know what they're doing, I would suggest that they go for a more generic course. And those students who really know which path they want to follow, I would suggest that. We also have sports coaching science degrees, which is mainly to do with applied psychology and acquisition of skill and how we learn. At the moment, I think that for our degree especially, we're looking at how sport can be used for social justice, how sport can be used for sports development. So nowadays, I think there's a lot more funding, and the way that the industry is going is using sport as a tool for development, using it in prisons, using it in low socioeconomic areas. And we're seeing a lot more funding strands available around that. I think the way we're also seeing things move towards, we also have a sports psychology degree, but I think things are moving towards that physical activity being used for well-being. So I think we haven't seen that now, but I think we will see a new career pathway in that psychology and well-being kind of area. So, and I think people can follow that from a broad spectrum of bases. They could do that from a psychology degree or more of a youth development, youth worker degree. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of students might feel like they need to specialise or know exactly what they want to specialise in as soon as they enter university. But like you said, there is the option, if you are unsure, but you do know that you want to study a sports pathway, that you can specialise sort of further down the line. In terms of what you offer, Sean, at the University of Bath, I'm assuming it's very similar to other universities like St Mary's, but are there certain skills that you would hope to see or that you would look for in students applying for a sports science degree?
Yeah, so we have a lot of those courses that you have listed there at Bath, but our biggest one and the main one that I have experience with is sports and exercise science. And I think, as Nick said, the key thing with that one is that it should be seen as a science first and foremost. So it's about applying scientific process and questions to sports and health and exercise topics. So all the skills that you need to be a good scientist apply there. So having an inquisitive mind, being good at problem solving, numeracy skills. You don't have to be excellent at maths, but having a decent level of numeracy skills is useful in things like biomechanics and stats, IT skills, and then some of the softer things like being able to work in teams and being able to communicate. All the general kind of skills that apply across science apply to sports and exercise science in particular. So yeah, as Nick said, I think for sports science, it's a science first and foremost, but applied to a sports setting. So, and as Nick also said, it's very useful. It's quite a general one. So if you don't know right now that you want to be a coach, or you want to be a nutritionist, or you want to be a performance analysis, sports science is a good option because all those things are still open to you at the end of it. Whereas some of those other courses, some things like sports journalism, for example, you perhaps narrow off some or close off some of the options to you if you go with that degree. So sports science is a good one if, firstly, you enjoy science and are pretty good at science topics, and then you have a real interest in sport. I think that's a good combination to go with sports and exercise science in particular.
I think, to add to what Sean was saying as well, I think people in sport are moving towards a systems thinking approach. So there's far more integration between different scientists and coaches to develop the athlete holistically. So when you do something like a sports exercise science degree, you will use those different areas of interest, because the way that we're working now, it's far less in kind of separate silos. Would you agree, Matt, working in the professional game?
Yeah, definitely. It's just interesting to hear what you guys were saying around looking at going into doing a more generalised degree through sport and exercise science, for example, I know a lot of people I've come across in professional sport, working in professional sport, that went down that route first and then decided to specialise after that. And with that, I think that brings a great grounding in some of those key areas that you just don't get sometimes if you then decide, or you decide initially that you want to specialise in something first off. So I think it's a great option.
Yeah, fab. And then Danielle, from your perspective, so you studied, was it sport science or sport and exercise science?
I started with sport and exercise, and then I dropped sport, I think, in my last year to go exercise science.
Okay, so would you say that set you up in a good grounding for your future career in the fitness industry, or in hindsight, do you think would there have been a better route for you? What do you think on that?
I think that I graduated a very long time ago, and courses have evolved a lot. So my sport and exercise science degree did not fully set me up for the fitness industry, in that I had all the academic knowledge and all the amazing array of skills, but I had no on the ground, how do I actually train someone, how do I actually lead a class skills. And that's something that I then had to do outside of my degree. But I know that nowadays you get your level 2 qualifications and maybe even your level 3 qualifications tapped onto your degree. So that's definitely something that has been improved. In terms of working in the fitness industry, I think the most important thing for me was that, like everyone said, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just did know that I loved science, and I did know that I loved sport. So it made sense to do a sports science degree. And while I was doing that degree, it was really a sense of discovery, where I got to try so many different modules, to try them on, see if they were modules that I enjoyed. On my course, I realised I didn't really like nutrition, but then I realised that I really enjoyed psychology. So it was a really good option to learn about myself as a person, what areas I liked, what areas I excelled in, what areas I was passionate about. And then there was also a module where we got to go out and do a little mini placement, which was the most valuable part of my course, because it meant that I had to go out there and find out what jobs were available, and then decide how I would make my degree suitable for those jobs. So I think the placement year at Bath University would have been an amazing opportunity, or is an amazing opportunity as well, for those who are looking to discover what they would potentially want to do after their degree.
So those courses, did you do those sort of obviously independently? Have you done that sort of as a bit of a journey along the way? How did you sort of embark on finding sort of that sort of what we class as extracurricular, I guess?
So you mean the fitness courses?
Yeah. How did you go about finding those, or was it a bit of trial and error?
So I basically had to amalgamate the knowledge that would be acceptable for a fitness course, like my level 2 and level 3. And then I had to fill in the gaps with other courses. And then I was awarded my level 3 personal trainer award. So yeah, again, that was, I think the most important word for me anyway, is just discovery and being curious about what's out there and finding out what little bits that you can do outside of your degree, even before you do your degree, that can potentially help you in the future.
Okay, fab. So moving on from that then, so there's such an array of courses, and it's really good to know that a lot of them are now interlinking, so it's not just very separate disciplines. Lots of people are now working together, and there are those options there that if you are a student at the moment thinking, I don't really know what route I want to go down, it is a lot more open. But one of the things that I get asked about the most is, what's the difference between physiotherapy and sports therapy? And, you know, I want to go to be a physiotherapist. Maybe, you know, I've seen this sports rehabilitation course. I don't want to work in the NHS. I definitely want to work in sport. What is the best route for me? So we often get asked this as PE teachers. Now, I'm going to hand over to Matt to sort of answer a few of these questions in a minute. But just for some of you, if you're one of these students out there who are thinking, what do I do? What is the difference? you probably have had a little bit of a look already at UCAS. So if you go onto the UCAS search tool, it's a really valuable tool for you to look at, you know, what different institutions will require from different degrees. And one of the things with physiotherapy and sports therapy and even sports rehabilitation is there's quite a fine line when you're looking at them as to, you know, what makes them different. So when you're looking on paper, for me, or for, you know, Joe Blogs off the street, they might not look that different. So as you can see there, you've got an example, you know, both require 3 A levels. Both of them normally stipulate a required subject, so like a biological sciences subject. And then the entry requirements, again, these will vary. So you will get a lot higher entry requirements, and also you'll get quite a lot lower as well. So on the face of it, they look quite similar. But Matt, in the real life sort of industry of it, if you wanted to be, you know, a sports therapist, would you be any different to a physiotherapist working for a team? Can you kind of talk us through your journey a little bit about what you studied and what is the difference for students out there who are unsure?
Yeah, thanks, Abs. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head already there. I went through that that same questioning process as to what I should choose coming out the back end of A levels, and as you said, you look at all the information that's out there, and well, you know, sports therapy gives you a grounding in some of the scientific principles that Nick and Sean spoke about, with some of the sports science aspects to it. So that was very appealing. It then gives you a really good grounding in the theory, understanding, and practical application of using manual therapy techniques and things you'd need to do to be able to treat athletes. So already, it, as you said, if you wanting to go straight into sport, and I know obviously we talked about a minute ago about some of you guys listening will have a key or a real passion for going into this already, and want to not do the sort of sports science route, but go straight into a very specific course. And I was the same, and so it kind of on paper sounded like sports therapy definitely was the way to go. And what the sports therapy or sports rehabilitation courses that are out there at some of the good unis will do is give you exactly what we've just talked about there. Give you a great grounding in all those aspects to do with working in elite sport when you finish that degree. Unfortunately, the bit that's missing in the middle is the I won't bore you with too much details, but the registration, or the ability to then practice and practice at a high level as a sports therapist in elite sport. This certainly doesn't stop you working in elite sport, and it shouldn't deter you from a career in elite sport if that's what you want to go down. But it certainly pushes you into it, or it allows you to sort of get the grounding to do that. Like I said, this registration is key, and hence why I went back and then studied physiotherapy, because after a while of getting turned down for quite a few jobs in a more senior position, shall we say, it became very clear that because of legal issues and insurance and other things, I couldn't work at a sort of the level I thought I could work at in elite sport. This is changing, and it certainly has got better. And like Danielle said, my sports therapy degree was too long ago to remember, or I try not to remember. So it is changing, and even at Southampton Football Club, we employ 4 sports therapists, 2 sports therapists and 2 guys that came through sports rehabilitation degrees within the first team, and they are fully integrated within that first team and key members of staff. What they can't progress to is for example, you know, my job is running on the pitch and making decisions with players. That just at the moment just doesn't allow you to do that. So it kind of depends where you want to go. And what I would say as well, at the back end of my sports therapy degree, a lot of other students on my course and stuck with their sports therapy degree and have gone on to become very, very successful in the sort of private sector sports rehabilitation, working in private clinics or with one-to-one with certain athletes and things like that, and have become very successful at the back end of it. But like I said, I knew where I wanted to get to, and physiotherapy was the way forward. Coming out the back end of that, and I'll try not to again take too long on this, but what physiotherapy then enables you to do, or enabled me to do, was combine my grounding in sports science and sports therapy with a bit more knowledge in and around the medical aspects of what the physiotherapy course gives you. And then I think that only strengthened my ability to then apply for sports physiotherapy jobs out the back end of that. Some other of my colleagues over the years have gone through the sports science degree and then applied for physiotherapy master's degrees, and then gone into work into physiotherapy in sport as well. So you might not, like as the guys talked about earlier, you might not think that, or you might not know, but there's always options out the back end of that, and some people go that way, and some people go through this route as well. Does that answer your question, Abby? Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's really useful, because I think particularly students, if I'm just pulling something up now, that this is just one example, and it happened to be the same university who had a physiotherapy degree and a sports therapy degree. And like you've really said, on paper, they give you similar skill sets in terms of, your ability to apply, the correct therapy as and when needed, obviously acutely or sort of in rehab. But just a few things for students to identify. Like Matt said, you can change your pathways later down the line. So it's not the be all and end all, but it's really useful for you to be aware when you are researching what degree you want to go into, what is being asked of you. So this university, for example, the UCAS tariff points for physiotherapy and sports therapy are actually the same, and it's just the required subject, so the biological science, which requires you to have a high grade or higher tariff points in that for physiotherapy. So there are very, very slight differences between the two in terms of those requirements, but it's really how you want to apply that later down the line in your career. And I think that's really useful to hear from you about where people are that either or also in sort of the setting at Southampton, that you have physiotherapists working alongside sports therapists, and as an integrated team and a successful team. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Moving on a bit now for students and looking at doing your personal statements. So we had to do this back when we applied to university. It's not a new thing, writing your personal statement. Your teachers will have had lots of experience in doing that as well. But it still can be quite a daunting task, having to write this page about you. Okay, I find it difficult. I think everyone on the panel will probably say to a certain degree, it's really hard to, I'll sell someone else's skills all day long and I'll praise someone else, but when it comes to actually talking about you, it can sometimes be really, really difficult. So in terms of personal statement, if your teachers have shown this sort of format to you already, and we might have had someone else give you a talk on it, these are the general stages that you go through with your personal statement and the different aspects you hit. Academic interest, so that's the skills that you are currently developing within your courses at college. So whether that be an A-level course, a BTEC course, an applied science course. So in that section of your personal statement, you will talk about your academia. Then you've got your external experience. So do you volunteer? Have you done any work placements? That's particularly important, I know, for courses like physiotherapy. Then extracurricular, are you part of any clubs, teams, societies? And then obviously you round up with a conclusion. What I wanted to ask particularly Nick and Sean about were, when you, obviously the admissions tutors will be reading these personal statements, but what will they be looking for in terms of sports science students who are really going to stand out? So for you, Sean, if you're inundated with applicants and oversubscribed, what's going to make one student get a place at university on a sports science degree, which is really competitive, over another?
Yeah, good question. So I'm not directly involved in admissions, but I think I can speak to this reasonably well. And I think the main thing in that introduction is, I guess, your real passion for the topic coming through. So it shouldn't just be the case that you quite like sport and so sports science sounds all right. There should be a real kind of passion and interest. So trying to get across why sports science is the perfect course for you. So personally, I remember as soon as I saw, when I was looking at A-level courses quite a long time ago now, as soon as I saw those two words together, sports and science, I knew that was the degree for me, because I really enjoyed science and a number of the science topics. And then sport was my other main interest. So there was a real light bulb moment, and it became my real passion, that topic. So that's what I'd really want to see, is that real passion for the subject and why it's a perfect course for you in that introduction. And then I guess the other stuff is I guess fairly standard, but it's a sports science program, so we'd expect you to be interested and involved in sport in a fairly big way. You certainly don't have to be an elite athlete or a high level athlete to do sports science. I definitely wasn't going into university, but if it's a sports science program, we'd expect you to be interested and involved in sport in a fairly decent way. And then I think, as most courses will look for, but particularly sports science, we quite like our students to be well-rounded, so to have a range of interests, both beyond sports, because a good sports scientist is able to talk to lots of different people. So if you have extracurricular activities, definitely get those and make a big deal of those in your statement. Okay,
thanks. And Nick, if you were sort of recommending things that students could do now, so if they're in year 12 perhaps, and they really want to enhance their personal statement, and it's obviously quite difficult at this moment in time, given the limitations on certain sporting activities, but what kind of things maybe could students be doing now or slightly further into the future to sort of enhance them?
I think what we would be looking for is curiosity, and so actually I think this is a really perfect time for students, because this is the time where you can look at TEDx speeches. I think now is the time when there are lots of, so if there's an element of the course or an element of their A-level that they've really enjoyed, that they've demonstrated that they've got some independent learning skills, that they've actually gone away and thought, really interested in that, who writes on that, and listen to Royal Society talks or something that is really related to, or is they found out who is the main person who really researches the area that they've found something out about. So when you're looking for those exceptional candidates, I think it is looking at them going beyond in terms of their academic interest and saying, I'm really committed to this. I've also done this and this. I think so. Actually, now is the time to become more rounded and actually see what else is out there.
Yeah, that. And Jess, just coming on to you. So you have written a personal statement a few years ago. Can you remember how it felt sort of starting that process and what kind of things you went through in order to obviously submit and be successful in an application?
Yeah, I think it's quite a daunting task to start with, because as you said, it's quite difficult to sell yourself. Like, you can sell other people all day, but selling yourself is it's almost like you don't want to do it because you don't want to big yourself up and things like that. But thinking back, I think the main way I went about doing mine was sitting down and structuring it in bullet points with things that I wanted to include. So any external experience, basically like you've kind of listed it on the slide, just going through in notes, bullet point form, and then thinking about how to structure it based off those bullet points. And I think, yeah, for me, echoing what Sean said as well, like it just was what I was passionate about. So just trying to really get that across and to really show why I was passionate and why I was a good candidate for the degree course was the thing that I capitalised on the most, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's it. I think that's what the tutors want to see from you, because that's what will set you aside from someone else. We're not going to go into personal statements. You could do a whole session on personal statements and going into the intricacies of it. But A big thing that you might hear is ABC, sort of activity benefit course. Whatever you say, you know, you do, or you have a certain skill as a student, if you can essentially back that up and give an example of how you've developed or how you've applied that skill, that is so useful, because then it helps the admissions tutors put you into a bit of context and really understand where you're at and how you've actually managed to do it, rather than kind of just listing off, you know, I'm a good communicator, I can work as a team. That doesn't tell us much about how you've actually done that. So yes, personal statements, we will be doing another webinar just on personal statements, but we will move on from there. So while we're with you, Jess, so quickly, we mentioned at the start, so Jess is currently in her final year, or going into her final year, sorry, of her sports science degree. I actually was fortunate enough to teach Jess quite a few years ago now, so I taught her an A-level, and it's been amazing to see the progression of a student moving forward through their sports science journey. So Jess, first of all, you took a gap year, didn't you, after doing your A-levels? So can you tell us sort of a bit about that, and was it worthwhile? Because some students here might be thinking about taking a gap year.
Yeah, so I've basically been involved in high performance sport for most of my life until I got to uni. I competed in triathlon on the British Super Series as an elite junior. So going through my GCSEs and A-levels was hard. I'd spent a lot of time trying to fit 25 to 30 hours of training a week around doing major exams. So coming out of my A-levels, I was a little bit fried. I knew I wanted to go to uni, but I thought I felt a bit frustrated that my race season had always coincided with my exam season, and I felt like I had unfinished business. So I decided to take a year out to train full time, which ended up not making too much of a difference to my performance. It seemed like actually having work to do kind of helped in a way, because it kept me occupied and gave me a break from the training and vice versa. So one of the best years of my life, though. Definitely no regrets taking the gap year. And going into the degree, I don't think it really sets you back at all. I think up until now, I would have said, or before now, I would have said that a year is a long time, but I just increasingly think that it's really not at all. So if you're thinking about taking a gap year and worrying that it's going to set you back, then I would definitely say that that's not the case. And if you've got a passion that you want to pursue before university, I definitely say to go for it, because I definitely don't regret my decision. And in terms of having older or being older in the cohort when you arrive, by the time you get to university, age doesn't seem to really matter. I've got plenty of friends who are a couple of years younger than me, some that are older. You're all in the same boat doing the same thing, so you really don't tend to notice how old someone is. So if you're worried about that, then yeah, don't be.
Okay, and then so for you, what if students are thinking, well, what is a typical day? So in terms of sports science, as a student, what is sort of a typical day or a week for you in terms of lectures, practicals? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it will obviously vary from uni to uni, and as you progress through the years, your contact time tends to reduce as the degree becomes a bit more independent. But certainly in first year, you're kind of exposed to quite a few different topic areas at a basic level, and it's very much about kind of bringing everyone who's come from different backgrounds, whether that's A-levels or different ways of getting into uni, trying to bring them all up to the same level. So my first year was probably my busiest year. I think I had around 15 hours of contact a week, maybe a bit longer, and that's sort of split up between 2-hour lectures, and then labs in smaller groups, so particularly for subjects like biomechanics and physiology, where you're learning techniques like fingertip blood sampling and Douglas bag procedures for gas analysis and stuff like that. You have smaller, more practical lab groups, and then also some smaller kind of workshop-based stuff for biomechanics, where you're learning maths and processes like that, where you have more extensive help from lecturers and stuff. But I would stress that first year is very not basic, but it's very guided, you have a lot of guidance, and it's all about getting you thinking in the way that university wants you to think, because it's quite different to A-levels and to previous teaching that you've had. So it's very much like a bringing everyone up to speed year, and experiencing all the kind of different areas in quite a broad sense initially.
And then did you have the chance to sort of specialise in certain modules, or is that something that will come in your final year that you're starting?
So particularly at Bath, it's something that comes in your final year. So my first and second year are pretty much already decided what you take. I think I had one choice in first year between strength and conditioning module and a high performance environment module, but first and second year are pretty much predetermined. And then when you get to your final year, you can pretty much tailor your degree in whatever way you want.
Okay, fab. And then you've just returned, or sadly you have to return a bit earlier than intended, from Australia, where you were doing a placement. So can you sort of give us a bit of insight as to what that might be like for a student? Because that could be quite an appealing thing for someone looking at a sports science degree.
Yeah, so I always knew it was an option, but when I initially applied, I didn't apply for the placement year. I think because at that time I was probably under the illusion that having my gap year was setting me back and I needed to get out of uni straight away. But after my first year, I quite quickly realised that there was nothing that was majorly standing out in terms of a career. And the reason I chose sports science was because I wasn't entirely sure what avenue I wanted to go down. So I thought if I did sports science, I'd get exposure to multiple, and then I'd be able to see where my passion lied. And I hadn't really worked that out. So at the end of my first year, I actually transferred onto the placement year degree. And yeah, University of Bath has a partnership with the New South Wales Institute of Sport in Sydney, which the logo is on the slide there. So as soon as I found that, it was like my absolute dream placement. It was still quite broad in terms of when I got out there, I had experience across all different areas of sports science. So it wasn't a specific physiology placement, it was encompassing all different areas. And I basically just thought, okay, well, if I don't know what I want to do from just the degree, I need to get out into the workplace and see how things actually apply, because university teaching is quite regimented in the sense that it's obviously classroom based. So I think any experience that you can get actually applying that to the real world, I mean, it's the most valuable thing, part of my degree so far. I've learned so much from being out there. So yeah, I can't recommend it enough, going and taking a placement somewhere.
Okay. And Sean, I think you mentioned to me before that I think it's something like 80% of students do go and do a placement, is that right?
Yep, so a number of sports science courses now offer placement or sandwich years as part of the program, but at Bath we've had it for quite a while, I think during the entirety of the sports science program. So students come along, they do their first year and second year as studies at University of Bath, and then in that third year they get the opportunity to go on placement. And yeah, roughly 80% of our students choose to go on that option, which I think is great. And as Jess said, it opens up a huge range of opportunities. So for those who don't quite know what they want to do, which path they want to go down, we have great links with sports institutes like NSWIS and lots of places in the UK as well that give you a really general sports science experience. So you get to get involved in lots of different projects. And I did a placement as part of my program at Bath as well, and I was in a similar research institute in Auckland, and that's where I got introduced to working with rugby teams and sports injuries, and that's now what I do for a job. So I had no idea that that was something I was going to end up doing prior to going out on that placement, but the exposure to it showed me that it was something that I found really interesting, and something that I could turn into a career, I guess. But equally, it might be that you go into placement, you're thinking that you want to be an S&C coach or a sports nutritionist or whatever it may be, and you might go on placement and realize that that's not the career for you, because in the reality of it might be very different to what you had preconceived going into it. So that's just as useful an experience, I think. Finding out early on that career isn't right for you can also be very useful as well. So yeah, I think placements are a great opportunity. If it's not built into your program, then trying to find, say, a summer internship somewhere just to try and get those real world experiences, because as Jess said, we can't teach you everything, and placements are about applying the knowledge that you've been given at university to a real world context, and you'll see that some things work, some things don't, and that's really the way you become a true sports scientist, is through gaining those experiences. So yeah, placements are definitely a really valuable experience, and we've had a number of students go to Southampton, for example, and I think Jonathan Woodhouse is with you there, Matt, who's a former student of ours who went on placement at Southampton and is now back there working. So there's lots of examples of students who go on placements and then get offered jobs back at those institutions, because if they impress, then yeah, it's a foot in the door, and they've got a network and a group of connections to get a job opportunity as well. So really useful experiences if you can do those.
I think a good example for me as well is biomechanics. So at university, I enjoy biomechanics, but it's quite heavily a maths-based subject when you're taught it at uni. So doesn't come naturally to me. I'm okay, but I don't tend to do the best in biomechanics assessments. But going to NSWIS this year and seeing the actual applied reality of biomechanics, absolutely loved it. So that's motivated me to tailor my degree towards biomechanics in my final year, even though, you know, if I'd just gone off university experience, I probably would have said that it wasn't for me. But until you get that practical experience and you really see how things are applied, you don't necessarily have the ability to understand how it would be if you were going to go into that in the real world.
And you said, Jess, that you've now potentially thought about going down the route of being a performance analyst. Would you have had any idea what that was before you went on your placement or even went to university?
Yeah, no, not at all. It's not on my degree course in any way, shape or form. Had never really heard of it, and ended up working with the performance analysis department loads at NSWIS, and got really into that as a potential career path. So that's kind of my aim going forward. So essentially I'm going to end up going into something that's not even been mentioned on my degree. But if I'd not been on the placement, I would have had no idea about it. And for me, the placement's achieved its goal because I wanted to take it to try and find out what my passion was. And I found it. But then I also think, like a lot of the others have said, there's a massive integrated approach when you go into high performance sport. So I guess some people could be looking at it and thinking, was it worth doing a sports science degree if I'm now going to go into performance analysis? And I would say 100%, because having that knowledge of how the departments interlink and knowing, you know, what the coach's role is, what the physiologist's role is, what the psychologist's role is, and how that ties into your role is so important when you get into a high performance environment. And I've seen that first and foremost at NSWIS. So yeah.
Okay, fab. Nick,
Yeah.
something to that?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, Jess is really lucky to get that opportunity to work in elite sport and have that experience. However, a large part of the industry and the GDP is made up from other sporting kind of experiences. And so lots of degrees do have those sandwich years, but the other thing the students can also do is look to see if their degrees have work placement modules. So quite often at level 5 and level 6, which is their second and third year, they can have work placement modules. So for example, that's a real strength of our course, and we're really open about what those what they do on the whole, because of the degree that we have, most of them go into teaching. However, some of our students, one of our students is an Instagram influencer, has come on the degree and has realized, actually, I don't want to be a teacher. This is not for me. And has gone and worked with a sports marketing business in the city, and has absolutely loved that experience of doing the module and working. And within that sports marketing business, she went on to do lots of charity sporting events, etc. So I think when you're looking for a degree, I would say the work placement is something to really look for on the modules, or as the sandwich year, because majority of our students who've been really successful at getting a place at PGC or getting graduate level employment afterwards have been due to their work experience. And I think, you know, that example of somebody who got a placement at Southampton and then the job, that's very much the case. So something that we encourage our students to do is think about, where do they want to live and work? So if they're at St Mary's and they want to stay in London, then we encourage them to go out to schools in London to build a community, to build a network. And you're not looking for a job at you know, in your second year, etc. But that really great impression that you make will build those links that hopefully will set you up for something when you come out. So our most successful students are the ones who've made the most of their placement and have really gained something from it. We have close links with Chelsea Foundation, and lots of our students get roles within Chelsea Foundation. One of our students got a role as the Women and Girls Officer at Fulham. So there's all these opportunities out there, but I think students have to be really proactive. You can no longer just do a degree and say, I'm a graduate, employ me. Like, students now have to say, I'm a graduate, but also I've worked in this setting and this setting, etc., and demonstrated they're able to use the soft skills as well as the academic skills, really.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's something, again, which Danielle mentioned earlier, that actually the work placement year was so invaluable in helping her, first of all, carve out what career she wanted, but also it puts you on that platform for people to recognise who you are in the industry, rather than being sort of like another number of a student. Leading on to that then, so we're really lucky, we've got two industry professionals here, very opposite, very different roles, but have both obviously worked and built up their careers over the last, how many years, guys? I don't know, 10, 15? Over the last year. So if we start with you, Dan. So first of all, can you sort of give the students a bit of an insight about, well, what is your current day-to-day? What is your career in sport and fitness? And kind of how have you carved that out? Because yours is a very kind of modern, what I call contemporary career, and not something that we chose or opted as a module at university. So can you talk to us a bit about that?
At the moment, my day-to-day is a mix between being a health and fitness professional, in that I deliver online classes due to the current situation, and I also manage my blog, which is another income stream for me. So my blog's called Keep It Simple. You can see it on the screen there. And I guess that's the bit where you can call me a content creator and or influencer, because that comes with running an Instagram account, running communities on Facebook, running Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, I've got it. And that kind of, like you said, was not an option when I graduated. I did graduate and I went into a traditional role in sport development. So I was working for the London County Sport Partnership, looking after education for fitness professionals and sports coaches in London. And then I actually decided to take a break. I had another role working in elite sport in a university in South London. And then I decided to take a break, and I ended up working in retail, in a community role, but that's where I then got to meet lots of people in the fitness industry. And I think that point's been echoed a lot about making and creating a network, and you just don't know who you're going to meet and what opportunity they might bring to the table that might be suitable for you. A, it could be the perfect job, or B, it could just be an opportunity to discover and, like Nick was saying, be curious about opportunities in the industry. So it was from there that I really then decided to make a go of my blog and my Instagram and whatnot. So I think it just came down to finding a passion for marketing, and I didn't have any of that experience. But as much as you can do a degree in marketing, you can also learn on the job, and then you can back it up with other experience. So I ended up taking some contract jobs with a PR agency. I did that for a few months. And as a content creator and influencer, you end up having so many different roles. You're a marketer, you're a social media expert, you're a writer, you get to do everything. You end up, if you take your own photographs, taking photos, and it's an opportunity to share your passion, especially in sport and fitness. So I think it's something, when you were talking about statements for applying for university courses as well. I think
Yeah.
having a blog would have been a really great thing to put on an application, to be like, look, here's this example of how I share my passion for sport or for fitness with as many people as I can possibly reach. So it has a lot of good benefits, I think, for sure, and I've really enjoyed it. It's stressful at times because again, I think when I graduated, it was very much you graduate, you get a job, you buy a house, you have kids, and you have a car. And then now it's so different. It's not possible for young people to get on the property ladder. So you have to spend your money on experiences. So I think that's where the shift has come, in that now you don't have to have a career and do that for 45 years or till you retire. There's so many different options out there. If you end up going down one path and you decide that's not where you want to go, or that's not how you expected it to be, you are able, and it's much more acceptable, to completely do a 360 or 180, whichever way you want to go, because 360 full circle, right? 180. You can do a 180 or a 275, whatever, and choose a different path.
Yeah, definitely. And if there was a student out there now who's thinking, well, I love fitness, I'd love to show people what I do on a regular basis, whether it be with, a sports team that they're part of, or whether they work with young people, where would they start with sort of setting up a blog? Is it quite easy? Are there things they can look at to help them?
I think it is quite easy, and I think there's even some university courses, depending on what you're studying, that encourage you to do that, to share your experience. And I think the best place probably to start would be like an Instagram account. It's free, it's easy, it's quick. And then with a blog, you can start on a free platform. And it's one of those things that you can't wait until it's perfect. You just have to use your voice as it is now, and that will develop over time. So even if you just start by sharing your experience of, going to university and sharing about your course, there will be other students out there that will find that valuable, because everyone's experience is so unique, right? I just did a MSc, and being in my 30s, doing an MSc and essentially rocking up with lots of people who were doing traditional jobs as a writer and content creator and influencer was an experience in itself. So yeah, don't be afraid to share, don't be afraid to talk about your experiences, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and welcome feedback.
Oh, fab. And then Matt, for you, so in embarking on obviously being a physiotherapist, so how's your journey got to be where you are? So I'm sure there's lots of students out there who on paper are like, I want to be a physiotherapist, I want to work with a football team, my favourite team is whoever, they've got that passion to get there, but there's obviously quite a few stepping stones they're going to have to go on that route. So sort of, can you give us a bit of an insight into what, a student would have to do bar just the degree?
Yeah, and it's really interesting hearing Jess, Sean and Nick talk about work experience, things like that. And I think that is so critical when it comes to elite sport, getting your face out there, your name out there. As Sean said about one of his previous students who's working in the academy at Southampton, taking that internship opportunity is vital, or critical. Interestingly, hearing about what Danielle was saying there, around getting content and things like that out there. It's this is the world we're living in now, and again, if we've got a job advert and we're looking for someone new, we will look at their social media and things like that and see what kind of things they've been doing. It's really about putting your best foot forward and trying to get involved with some of that. I was, I guess, lucky in some ways. I had a little bit of a foot into elite sport through contacts and other people sort of prior to sort of starting physio. So it was a great starting point, and it's not for everyone. And I think it was interesting hearing Nick talking a minute ago. These work experience opportunities can also confirm that you don't want to do that job. I think that's something really important to say, because elite sport is not for everyone. And Abby will sympathise with this. It's 7 days a week. It's 12 hours a day. On some weeks it is not the glamorous, all the glamorous things that that may sound. And you have to have a real understanding and passion for what it is and why you're doing it, because and to experience that is really, really important.
Yeah, and that kind of comes on to my next question in terms of what are the best and worst parts of your sort of job. So what would you say for you, Matt, are sort of your highs and your lows in terms of working in the career you have?
Yeah, I think one of the worst lows was sat in a typhoon in the middle of Tokyo with the building shaking and people wanting to have physio and knocking on my door, and I thought there's probably more important things going on at the moment. Athletes are single-minded people and they only have one thing on their mind, and that's certainly not their own safety at some points. Spending 6 weeks away from home for some of the Olympic stuff that I was doing, those kind of things are not the glamorous side of it. But what I would say is, the thing I wake up genuinely every morning and want to go to work. It's the changeable nature of elite sport. I get into work every day and something different will happen, guaranteed. The football players certainly make sure of that. And having that changeability and I think for me the demand as well is very high, and I get a lot from that as well. But like I said, it's not for everyone, and I think you just have to kind of take the rough with the smooth, really, with working in elite sport.
And how about for you, Dan? Sort of highs and lows of being in the fitness industry profession?
I'd say that the lows, so I'll start there. The lows are probably the unpredictability and the precariousness. So being self-employed comes with a level of risk, but then I guess being employed also has a whole set of pros and cons. So you just have to kind of balance up which one you prefer and which one you're more suited to. The highs, I would say, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and there's really no scope on how big as a brand you as a brand can be. There's no limits on who you can work with in terms of brands and elite athletes and other professionals. So really, the world kind of is your oyster. As much as you can imagine, you can create.
Okay, fab. Right then, so we are coming to the end, so thank you all so much, by the way. Some of those points I hadn't even considered, quite a lot of them that have come up, so I really appreciate everyone. I'm sure the students listening appreciate everyone's points that they've put forward as well. Going to ask a few questions now, so any students who are on, if you've got any questions, if you want to put them in the chat box, you are very welcome to pop them in now. We'll have a quick look at a few of them. But can I just ask the panel, just while we're having a look at that and seeing if there is anything the students want to ask, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to add, or tips or advice, or anything sort of moving forward that you think students might find useful as kind of the last point? Is there anything from you, Jess, possibly from a student's perspective, which you would say to anyone applying or thinking about applying now?
Yeah, I think for me, I think that you have a perception when you go into a degree that you do a degree and then you're an expert in that topic, and that is like the be all and end all of your career, and your degree is going to get you where you want to go. I think it's really important to remember that there's so many things you can do and explore outside of that can complement the things you're doing on your degree to make you as a person more holistic and give you way more skills. And I think something I've really noticed, particularly in this lockdown, coming back from my placement early and going from being on the other side of the world with a job to being at home with nothing to do, there's so much out there. There are so many ways to learn things online for free. So I think just always be curious and be willing to invest your time in things, even where you may not be earning any money, to put yourself out there and to get skills, and to network with as many people in the industry as possible. And I think just always ask questions and be willing to, you know, be rejected or be willing to be shot down by someone. But if you don't ask questions to people and you don't put yourself out there, then people aren't going to know who you are. I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Nick, how about, is there anything you'd say, sort of a final tip or piece of advice?
Yeah, two things really. Number one is really feel sure of yourself. From what I know in the statistics at university, there's approximately about a 10% dropout, and a lot of the dropout is expectations on course not matching what they expected. So really research your course really well and really know that that's what you want to do, because students don't generally drop out because they're not bright enough or they can't cope. They drop out just because they're on the wrong course or it's not what they're expecting. So do your homework on what you want to do, I would say, definitely. You don't have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, but that this course that you're going to love doing for 3 years, you know, you're committing for something for 3 years. And then the second thing, I'm looking at these questions here. People get a lot of emails, and a lot of those emails just get ignored because we're really busy people. So actually, you know, go down to your local club, meet the coach, say hello, well, 2 meter distance or whatever. But, you know, like, we still need that human contact, actually, and actually meet somebody, go and connect, offer your time, because sending just a really generic, hi, have you got any work experience, from Matt, etc., from Nick, you're not going to get very far with that, because I would say, in my experience when I did work in schools, I got a lot of those, and actually it was the students who went the extra mile, who wrote a really nice personalised email where they knew something about what we were doing, etc., or they actually came to meet up with me. They were the people that I'd say yes to, really.
Thank you. And Sean, can you see the chat box as well? There's a few questions there similar to what Nick sort of referenced as well, about, you know, what's the best ways of approaching and asking people, and, you know, how might people get these opportunities, because you do have to carve them out yourself.
Yeah, definitely, and it is very, very difficult in certain circumstances. So people in elite sport will receive literally hundreds of those types of emails over the course of a month. So as Nick said, it's about trying to stand out and personalising them. So doing your research beforehand rather than just sending a generic email, doing a bit of research about the person you're sending that email to, really trying to get your passion across in that email. If you've got examples of content or experience that you can put in, then that will help you stand out as well. It is difficult, but yeah, those sorts of tips can really make a difference. So yeah, if you see a generic email, you're quite likely to overlook it. Whereas if you see one that the student's taken the time to put together, then it tells you a lot about the students, and I think that will have a lot more chance of success. There's a question there around placements and whether everyone on the course can do them. So at the University of Bath, as I said, about 80% of students choose to do a placement. We can't guarantee the placement for everyone, because ultimately the student has to apply and the placement provider has to offer them the placement. Some of those are quite competitive. So for example, we have a placement with Hawkeye, which involves following, say, the ATP tennis tour around the world, setting up the Hawkeye system that tracks the balls, etc. So placements like that are very competitive, and they'll have quite an intensive interview process. And yeah, you do have to do a lot of work to get onto those ones. Others are a lot more simple and might just be an email to the placement provider. So we can't guarantee a placement, but pretty much everyone who wants to do a placement does end up with one at Bath. So we have lots of opportunities. We have all these links and connections, and we help you with your application to those placements and do all we can to get your foot in the door. But ultimately, you do have to do enough to convince the placement provider to give you the placement. So yeah, we do all we can, but we can't absolutely guarantee that everyone will get a placement, unfortunately.
Sorry, one other thing I'd say, that some of us don't have social capital. So I'm just thinking about who I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to A-level students, and you might not have that social capital. But if you work really hard and you have good relationships with your teachers, they might have more social capital than you. And actually they might be the person to recommend you. So you might, you know, reach out to your teachers, and that's not just your PE teachers. Teachers across your school possibly might be involved in sport in some way or another. So if you feel that you personally don't have social capital, you know, utilize the support of the people around you who really want you to get that step further.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. I think, and I'll come to you, Matt, in a second, because I know lots of people ask about opportunities. You do need to start small. So I wouldn't, as an A-level student, start approaching top flight Premiership clubs, you know, regardless of different sport, and saying, you know, can I come and shadow you? That takes years and years of work. And, you know, lots of clubs don't actually allow students to get in. But you can still get the same experiences at, you know, your local team, and your local team and club will get a lot of value out of you, and you also get lots of value out of them. I know, for example, Jess, and I saw this on LinkedIn, so, you know, it's never too early to get on platforms like LinkedIn. So as a young person, you know, follow what key people in the industry are doing on LinkedIn. And I noticed that Jess had gone back to her old triathlon club, and done a bit of work with them. Is that right, Jess? So you went back and you applied. Yeah,
I still have a good relationship with my coach, who's a good friend of mine. And over this lockdown period, I wanted to learn data visualization, because it's quite a big part of performance analysis and going into that kind of career. So I decided that I want to try and get to grips with Tableau, which is like an up-and-coming data viz software. But it's very complicated to try and learn something like that without a data set. So I just thought, I can either go and grab a meaningless data set off the internet, or I can think about how I could use my club's data set to benefit them, but also to benefit me, because I'm then learning the software through their data. So I just had a chat with my coach, and I said to him, have you got any performance data that you would like to see visualized in any way? And said, you know, I'm trying to learn this software, not promising anything, but if I get to grips with it, you might end up with something that's relatively useful for you in the future. And he was, definitely really happy for me to do that, and ended up producing something that hopefully he can use going forward. And I think I've watched a lot of webinars about getting into careers over lockdown, and the general consensus from people is think about where you can go, where your time can make a big impact on a club or somewhere where they maybe don't have the money to be paying for someone to do what you can do. And you can offer your time for free, which a lot of people don't want to do. But, you know, my placement that I just did was unpaid, and I think it's the most valuable thing I've ever done, and it's going to open doors probably for a good few years. So I think it's so worth investing your time in something and starting small. And once you can show people what you're capable of, then, you know, they're willing to hire you and give you a career.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, have you got anything to add to that in terms of sort of cold callers, students approaching you?
Surprisingly, people want work experience. Abby, you hit the nail on the head. We, as part of the first team at Southampton, we don't give work experience. We just don't do it. You know, last week we had 3 games in a week. There's no point a student being there. They're not going to learn anything from us because of the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But think outside the box. You know, for example, in Manchester, I can name 4 physios who have private practices. There's probably, between them, they've worked with Olympic sport, Red Bull athletes, you know, you name it, they've worked with them, and they have their own private practices, which may take work experience students. Like Jess has done, gone back to a local club. The amount of contacts that people have, you know, will really be surprising. I think start small and work your way up. It'll be a lot easier in the long run. You know, and unfortunately it takes a bit of effort as well. I think that's important to say. it will need some thinking about, and as you said, getting the email right or getting the contact right, going to meet someone face to face. It can all be quite daunting, and I think it's really vital that you spend a day just thinking about what you're going to say or how you're going to go about it. It's that's critical as well. But yeah, think outside the box a little bit. There's other ways into sport. It just doesn't have to be your nearest Premier League club or something like that. For example, one of the questions was, what did I do? I actually went to the Police and Fire Brigade Rehabilitation Centre, who were more than willing to take work experience students. They had one, most weeks. And that was really interesting just to see some of that as part of your physiotherapy degree. Yeah, you do a lot of NHS placements and things like that, which will open doors. So there's loads more options than sport, believe me, and some of those options are really, really beneficial.
Yeah, fab. And Dan, in terms of fitness, we're going to finish up very shortly, but just to sort of finish on students obviously looking in fitness, health, what kind of opportunities would you suggest for them if they're trying to look into that at the moment?
I think if you can get your level 2 qualification sooner rather than later, then that's a really good opportunity to get some part-time work while you're even studying or before you start studying. And again, you get to meet people, you get to learn about the fitness industry specifically, whether that's as a gym instructor or teaching classes, and you will get to meet people. Other than that, I think maybe there are lots of facilities that offer placements as well and work experience. I know that I work for the Altitude Centre in London, and they have had lots and lots and lots of students from University of Bath and Loughborough in. So there are places that you could probably go before you even get to the point of wanting to do your placement at university, and just get in contact and see if they have any opportunities available to spend a bit of time with them. Or even, I don't know, like working with PhD students, would they ever take like work experience? I know lots of PhD students who are doing research that could do with some support. So yeah, just think outside the box and try as many different places and people as you can.
I think just to add as well, like LinkedIn is massive, and I've only really just discovered it, but I feel like it's, for generations of students, it's becoming more and more like a place to put yourself out there, to build a profile. And also you can put in job specifications and filter for internships and get notified when an internship and something that you're interested in comes up. And I mean, I've been on it properly, I would say, for the last 6 months, and my network's just builds by the day, really. And if you're willing to put things out there, and it might seem a bit embarrassing at first to write about things that you've done, but imagine you give a company a CV and they're thinking, oh, I don't know whether to hire her or someone else, and then they look you up on LinkedIn and they can flick through some of the content you're putting out, some of the posts you're engaging with, and see a bit more about you, like in a complete virtual CV. I'm just finding it so valuable at the minute, and I think it's definitely worth setting up a profile.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I think, like you said, and I think someone else mentioned earlier, if you are on social media, firstly, use your social media wisely. Perspective, when I'm employing for my tutors or revision courses, I will look at their social media, I will check them out and see, first of all, that they've got good standards in terms of, in terms of safeguarding, and in terms of they carry themselves correctly online, because that's really important, because once it's out there in the public domain. But also it's excellent for showcasing you as a professional. So LinkedIn is fantastic for that, and I will always go on LinkedIn and I will see what the teachers and tutors are doing. I can see from their CV they're qualified, where they work, what experience they have, but actually on platforms like that I can see where they are at as a person and what profiles they're engaging in, and what current trends or topics are important to them. So yeah, really, really valuable tools out there. Right, we've run over long enough, but I just want to say thank you so much to everyone on the panel who
Abby, there's a question about sociology, and I'm just going to quickly say, I personally am a sociologist, so just pick your degree programme because some degree programs have amazing sociologists in sport. My thing is equality and diversity, and I do lots around gender and sexuality, etc. But yeah, so just pick your degree program, and you could be picking up lots of sociology modules on that. So
yeah, so I overlooked that one, but yes, sociology 100% is a really useful subject that sits alongside most degree courses, particularly, like you said, you know, sports development. So thank you. Well, thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate your time, and I think everyone will probably agree that it's been a really, really valuable session, and it's great to get such a broad array of people together from different areas, from lecturers, students, and professionals in the industry as well. I know I would have found it very valuable when I was in that situation. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, Abby.
Thanks,
Bye.
thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.